WNST, Taos in Baltimore, and WNST.net. It is lovely to have a week here where we can discuss a beautiful, dominant road Ravens victory here. We have that to discuss all week long. Luke Jones and I will be tearing it apart, and certainly we have discussed at length the Joe Flacco, the offense, the offensive line, the game ball to Austin Howard, our buddy, all the wide receivers from Macklin and Wallace and Perryman, specifically Wallace getting involved. But then the defense. I think when you play a backup quarterback home or away, you don't want to have a Case Keenum on your hands, right? Or a Charlie Batch on your hands. Or if you're the Steelers, a Ryan Mallett. Anytime you get beaten by a backup quarterback, there's something that really stings about that. And I think this defense sort of was up to the task, certainly early in the game, to create points, something out of nothing on the strip and the Jimmy Smith run. That really sort of propelled the team, and they kind of held it together when they needed to. It was not perfect by any stretch, and they could certainly tackle better and get at it at the point of attack, but they did what they needed to do to win the football game and get off the field.
Yeah, they were very opportunistic, and much like we talked about with the offense, they started fast. I mean, the offense scores, a 5-play, 75-yard drive, took a little over 2 minutes, and then the third play of the game for the defense, Patrick Owasso strips Jared Cook of the ball. Kind of a fluky play where it just bounced right there, and Jimmy Smith picks it up and runs for a touchdown. I mean, that was much more the defense that we saw week 1 and week 2. I mean, they still gave up some plays. They gave up some points. I mean, it wasn't perfect. They're still, as you alluded to, the tackling. The run defense was really shaky. I thought they did clean that up pretty well as the game went on. They gave up some plays in the passing game, as we acknowledge. I mean, even without Derek Carr, this is still a pretty talented offense that the Oakland Raiders have. And E.J. Manuel made some okay throws. He made some throws that were reminiscent of a backup quarterback. But I thought the Ravens defensively did what they needed to do. Wasn't dominant, but it certainly they were opportunistic. They made plays when they needed to. They held Oakland to field goals held them to a field goal when they had that next possession where they drove down the length of the field, and they did a lot of bending at times, but they didn't break too often.
But the options were limited. I mean, Manuel felt and looked like a backup quarterback. When he wasn't running around a little bit, which he can do, and extending a play, there wasn't a whole lot of that to be had. And when you're down 3 touchdowns early, and you sort of have to go up top, and you sort of kind of can't. That was a choppy effort for them, right? I mean, we talk about good wins or bad wins or beating Cincinnati in the beginning of the year. I don't know how this Raiders thing's going to turn out. I mean, they're 2-3. I can't look right now and say they're not going to go 6-10 or 7-9. They might.
Well, I'm not ready to go there just yet. But there's clearly a team having some issues. Derek Carr. There's a lot of talk. I mean, we very easily could have been talking about him making a miraculous recovery to play on Sunday. I mean, they listed him as questionable. He practiced on a limited basis. He was really lobbying Jack Del Rio to play, and ultimately they elected to err on the side of caution, which is probably smart when you're talking about a guy having a fracture in his back. But it sounds like he'll be back next week. That's a team that still has a lot of talent. I'd be hesitant to write them off. But that said, you have a Kansas City team that going into Sunday Night Football has looked like the best team in the NFL. So you don't want to be falling behind too quickly in your division. That I don't know how disappointed the Raiders are. I guess, when you're playing your backup quarterback, even though it's not a perfect comparison, because I think I'd take E.J. Manuel over Ryan Mallett, but what are the Ravens' expectations if Ryan Mallett's playing? There are none. So you have a little bit of that, but that's clearly a team that was desperate for a win, coming home, knowing they were playing a team that had been absolutely miserable offensively. So for them to give up the points that they did, offensively, I think if you had told them they'd score 17 points, going into the game, they might have taken that thinking that they might be able to win 17-13. So, from that standpoint, it wasn't great for the Ravens defense, but I did see some things that I liked. I thought Marlon Humphrey, despite having his issues on a couple occasions from Michael Crabtree, which, let's face it, he makes a lot of veteran corners look bad. So no shame in that. I thought he did some nice things. They had to use him a lot more than they planned because Jimmy Smith felt the Achilles issue creep up on his fumble recovery. So he was kind of limited to sub-packages, but I thought the Ravens used the dime effectively. I thought they dialed up some pressures and some blitzes more than we've seen the last couple weeks, where it's been a little bit more of a vanilla kind of feel from Dean Pease, which, hey, when he had Brandon Williams and when he had Brent Urban up front the first week or two, they didn't really have to do too much other than just go after quarterbacks with their four-man rush. So perhaps we saw a little bit of an adjustment there. A couple defensive backs finished with sacks. So it was good to see that. I mean, this defense still needs to clean up its ability to stop the run. I mean, this team, even if Brandon Williams isn't in the middle of that defense, they should still be able to stop the run because they've invested a lot in their defensive line. So, it's not as though they have to hold the opponent to 1.2 yards per carry or anything crazy like that, but you'd like to see them be a little more consistent than they've been to this point, stopping the run. But, again, with the injuries that they've been enduring up front, with Jimmy Smith kind of limited to the nickel package and dime package on Sunday, I think you'll take it. And, as you mentioned, when you're facing a backup quarterback, there's almost a thought of, you want to be dominant. You don't want to let them score at all. You don't want to worry about the stigma of being in danger of losing to a backup quarterback. So sometimes that can cause you to play with some bad habits and maybe try to do too much and try to play a little bit of a hero ball. I think the Ravens overall did a pretty good job avoiding that. And, again, this defense, when it needed to make some stops, it was able to do it. It wasn't perfect, but was certainly good enough with the offense playing its best game of the year.
Marshawn Lynch washed up, huh?
Yeah, I mean, Marshawn Lynch,
it only says Marshawn Lynch on the back. It's not what we remember as, beast mode and Skittles and all that. I mean, I don't see him breaking a game off for 165 yards this year.
Well, it's just one of those things where I don't know what everyone expected. I mean, the guy didn't play last year. He wasn't exactly a game wrecker his last year or two with Seattle. I mean, I know Oakland has a really good offensive line, and you'd like to think you can run block a little bit better than they have to this point. And, they ran for 108 yards on 25 carries. I mean, that's pretty good. But Marshawn Lynch, we'll see how that plays out. I know it's been a nice story for that community, considering he's from the Bay Area, knowing what lies ahead for Oakland.
Yeah, I think he's motivated, and he's won before, and they felt very close to being a winning team. Right now, I don't know. They got San Diego this week and Kansas City on short rest. They could be looking up at 2-5. I don't know. I mean, I don't.
I don't. San Diego. Well, first of all, Los Angeles.
Oh, whatever. You know what I mean.
I've made that mistake.
We're all calling them saying they'll be back and saying I don't know what the hell they're going to do.
Who knows? Who knows? But I don't know. I think you're panicking a little too much on the Raiders, but they certainly haven't looked great so far. I mean, you can use Derek Carr as not having him as an excuse for this week anyway. But yeah, they got to start winning some games. They got to start looking a little more consistent. I mean, I think for as much as you talk about their offensive talent, and as much as maybe 17 points with your backup quarterback isn't so bad in a vacuum, they only managed 10 points the 2 previous weeks. So, I think they're still looking for that explosive offense to really take off, and it hasn't really been there yet. So, I don't think they'll have problems with the Chargers. I mean, we'll see about Kansas City, but they've got to get going because again, with Kansas City and with Denver in that division, the Chargers are a mess, but you can't afford to be suffering too many more losses, and then you're 3-4 games back come Thanksgiving, and your only hope is an outside chance at a wild card at that point. So they certainly have to get going, but Ravens did a nice job, given the desperation level being pretty high for both of these teams. You have to really like what the Ravens were able to do on the road. And again, the defense wasn't great, but they made some stops. They made some plays when they needed to.
Tackling, right? Point of attack, first guy, first hand on, broken tackles. There was enough of that going on, as I said, to make Dean Pease puke. I mean, especially on the first drive, I counted a good 30 yards of extra, 6 on this play, 10 on that play, 8 on that play, 5 plays down the field. You got 30, 40 yards of yards after catch or really broken tackle, which is the thing that really, open field, okay, I'll let somebody run, I'll give you that. But when you're in the backfield and you make the play and it would be, let's say, 2nd and 8, and instead it's 2nd and 1, that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, it's something they have to clean up. I mean, it's something we really, we even saw that a little bit against Cleveland. You saw that certainly against Jacksonville and Pittsburgh last week. So, this defense, for as much as the resources that they put into it, they need to, it needs to pick it up a little bit. And it's certainly getting Brandon Williams back when that happens, that's going to be, that's going to be huge for them. There's no discounting what kind of impact he makes up front.
And hey, they won a game with Adam, right? I mean, we were wondering whether that was going to happen, right?
Sure. I mean, but that said, I mean, if you're clamoring about all this defensive line depth you have, and you kept 8 defensive linemen, you want to see guys like Willie Henry play well, and you want to see guys like Carl Davis play well, and so it was good to see. Willie Henry had 2 or 3 passes batted down at the line of scrimmage. I mean,
everyone knows his number now, right?
Yeah. So you want to see that. You want to see these guys progress a little bit. I mean, it's no sense, as much as guys like me have hammered them for focusing on defense in the draft. I mean, they've taken some of these D linemen on day 2 and early on day 3. When they have to play, you want to see them perform. So it was good to see that. Again, they need to clean up the tackling. I still think the nickel spot with Ladarius Webb there. I think ideally, once Jimmy Smith, you hope, gets past this Achilles issue sooner rather than later. I like seeing what they were able to do a good bit on Sunday, and that was sliding Derek Carr inside, and they played a little more dime. They put Ladarius Webb back at safety, which I think is his best spot at this point, and that allowed them to move Tony Jefferson into the box, into a dime role, or Anthony Levine playing the dime on a few occasions as well. That's what I think their best sub-package is ultimately going to be. It takes that extra linebacker off the field, even though I think it was pretty clear based on what we saw as far as usage. Looks like Patrick Owasso has beaten out Kamale Correa.
Yeah, he's just on the field, right?
Yeah. So, that's a credit to him. It doesn't speak too much for the Ravens' second-round pick from a year ago, but that'll be a different discussion for a different day. But you can take him off the field when you use dime. You can put Webb back at safety and keeps Derek Carr involved and gets Marlon Humphrey, or not Derek Carr, sorry, Brandon Carr involved, playing a little bit of nickel, playing inside, and you get Marlon Humphrey on the field. So that's what I think their best alignment is. Put Jefferson in the box, let him play a little more of a hybrid dime role. Certainly he plays the run really well, so if teams try to spread you out and run that way, I think the Ravens are covered. But
he can play like a linebacker.
Exactly, and that's my point. I don't like seeing him exclusively playing 10, 15 yards off the line of scrimmage. I think he's the kind of guy that you want him playing downhill.
But I saw Matt Judon running around in the secondary, high and wide into the end zone. I mean, sometimes coverage calls for weird stuff.
Oh, sure, and I'm glad you mentioned Matt Judon because he's someone who, frankly, had needed to show a little bit more than he had the last few weeks, and I thought did a really nice job on a couple occasions in pass coverage. I thought their linebackers in general did a better job setting the edge. The run defense still isn't where it needs to be, or where they want it to be, I should say, more so. But I think you definitely saw some things cleaned up from the last couple weeks. Again, 17 points. It's backup quarterback. Okay, I get it. You'd like to pitch a shutout every week. I understand that. Certainly you want this defense to be playing at a really high level, but playing on the road's tough. And the Ravens have kind of shown that firsthand the last few years with their lack of success on the road. So they were able to get the job done. And, again, they forced that turnover early on. They get a fumble recovery for a touchdown. That was just such a great way to build off of that opening drive offensively. And, again, 14-point lead right off the bat. I mean, that just that really allowed them to be more aggressive. They gave up some plays, sure, but they really put Oakland behind the 8 ball, knowing that they had a backup quarterback and face an uphill battle as it was.
Luke, Marlon Humphrey got schooled a little bit at various points, sort of in hand battles and whatnot, but 5 weeks into this thing, the kid's out on the field, he's running around, he's competing, not going to win every battle, but certainly as much as we can talk about a Correa not getting on the field, or even the past sins of the Matt Elams and the Arthur Browns, et al., are going down the list, this kid looks like he's going to play and play a lot and play pretty well, right? Probably improve.
I've been impressed with him since the first day of training camp. I really have. And, it was unfortunate that he missed such a large portion of the summer because he had a hamstring issue that kept him out of a couple preseason games and really put him behind the eight ball from a learning standpoint. But you've seen him catch up very quickly. The Ravens, this Achilles issue for Jimmy Smith, I'm not sure how they're going to proceed with this. Do you ultimately, because he felt it and they limited his workload, is this going to be something that's just going to be an issue moving forward? Do you perhaps say next week, let's sit the guy out? And that's not to say that I'm being disrespectful to the Chicago Bears, but it's a rookie quarterback, and if resting Jimmy Smith for a week or two gets the Achilles issue cleaned up, Marlon Humphrey, to me, has shown enough that you feel like you can survive, and he can do a nice job out there. I think he's the real deal. As much as that pick was kind of an underwhelming pick because he wasn't a consensus slam dunk, first round pick.
Well, we watched Jalen Ramsey run around 2 weeks ago. Watched him run around most of the afternoon, early waiting, red zone and waiting for the game. And he is considered sort of the gold standard of where the new crop is, right, for now. And, Humphrey wasn't thought of in those terms, to your point, right?
Right. He was someone that, very young. This guy was 20 years old when he was drafted. He's a young player, came out early out of Alabama. There were lots of questions about his ability to defend the deep ball. And, that's something that's still going to be a challenge for him moving forward. Teams will test rookies. There's no doubt. We saw it last week. As soon as he came into the game and was matched up against Antonio Brown, Ben Roethlisberger went right after him, and he defended it well. So, he gave up some plays on Sunday, but that's to be expected. This is a passing league. Points are scored. Despite what you might think watching the Ravens every week, Sunday notwithstanding, there are some teams that can really score and put up points in this league. So I think what I've seen from Marlon Humphrey, I have no reason to think that he's not going to be a really good player, and I think he's got a great chance to be a shutdown corner in this league, in the not-too-distant future. So if they do need to rest Jimmy Smith or continue to kind of use him, put him on a pitch count as they have the last couple weeks, then I think what you've seen from Marlon Humphrey should give some confidence that they made the right decision there and that this guy's on his way to being a really good player. Because overall, even though he gave up a few plays here and there on Sunday, I've really liked what I've seen from him really from the start of training camp.
Tasty overall win, right? And I guess behind all of this, we probably should praise John Harbaugh a little bit, right? For all of his stick-to-itiveness and all the corniness of the beginning and the middle roads of winning a championship and trying to climb the mountain again and trying to get Flacco healthy and trying to manage a salary cap and trying to manage with some players who, quite frankly, didn't work here, who were drafted at a high level. We were sort of doing the death dirge around here the last 2 weeks, weren't we? They have never looked worse than they did in London and against the Steelers at this juncture, at this point in Flacco's career. All the negative stuff we could have said about those two games and that 2 hours of football and what it represented from London to Baltimore, from an emerging AFC team over there that kicked their ass and embarrassed them, to a division rival that came in here and tippy-toed around and rolled out with a 2-touchdown victory. And you look at it and say, okay, well, where are they now? Are bad things going to happen? Well, and then back up they pop, like, the character in Halloween, right? It really is kind of amazing, and, there is some pedigree here, and I do think that when Flacco is running around with Macklin and Wallace against third and fourth string cornerbacks, maybe they should win a few of those battles. Maybe the vertical in the beginning, maybe we should have seen that coming, right?
Yeah, from the time that you saw that Emerson and Conley were going to be out for Oakland, that you should challenge. But you have to have pass protection that allows Mike Wallace to get down the field. He's fast, but you need at least a couple seconds to allow him to to get off the line and go deep and get that explosive play. So, it was certainly good to see that. I think to your point about John Harbaugh, I mean, if this team had gone out to Oakland and laid an egg and lost by 17 points and looked uninspired, you would have really been starting to wonder if he's losing this locker room. I mean, it's just it's natural to ask that question. I mean, when you play as poorly as they did against Jacksonville, and then to come home and look as uninspired as they did for a large portion of that 16.
Dude, when you're losing 44-0 in London, your coach is on the hot seat. I mean,
sure.
I know John wouldn't want to hear that, and there's extension this and all that, and his brother lost this weekend sort of in very unflattering terms, right? So, I mean, it does happen, not just in this league, but elsewhere, that these upsets happen and bad things. I mean, look what happened to DJ Durkin this weekend. I mean, all that optimism of Maryland, when you put 62 up, right? So having, these sort of extremes and these bad things happen, this is an extremely good thing that happened on Sunday in Oakland, despite the fact that it came at the hands of a second-string quarterback, right?
It was, and I think, probably more so than John Harbaugh. What about Marty Morningwig?
Sure.
I think if this team had been completely flat and inept offensively once again, I'm not so sure we wouldn't have been talking a whole lot about the possibility of a coordinator change. And look, I'm not saying that would have fixed everything, and this offense still has a long way to go. I don't want to completely proclaim everything to be fine because this even goes back to last year with him, and really going back to Mark Trestman in 2015. I mean, they just they've had a couple they had a performance like this at home against Miami last year. And then you kind of saw the same exact problems creep up right away after that. So they got to build on it. But I think for Marty Morningwig and for this offense especially, they needed to have a performance like this. I mean, the questions for Joe Flacco and the offensive line and Morningwig and Harbaugh is in charge of all of that at the end of the day. So you're right about that. But you do wonder if the Ravens had gone out to Oakland and lost 17-6 or 17-9. Where their defense, played well enough to win at least, and they just didn't get anything from their offense. I'm not so sure that John Harbaugh wouldn't have been compelled to make a change. I don't know that for sure, but it would have followed a very similar timeline to what they did with Mark Trestman a year ago, who was canned after the first 5 games when the offense wasn't doing anything. So who knows? It's certainly, as I said to you in a previous segment, this was a stop the bleeding win. And you dust yourself off, you come back home, you're at 3-2, which is what a lot of people talked about as kind of being a benchmark of where you needed to be at least through the first 5 games. And now you come home and you're facing a Bears team that's going to be playing a rookie quarterback and should have no excuse not to take care of business. Doesn't mean you blow them out by 4 touchdowns, but that should be a win. No excuses. I don't care who's in or out from a health standpoint. That's a team you need to beat, and if you do that, you're 4-2, and things are really starting to look up, especially when you acknowledge what kind of issues Pittsburgh's having and what issues they had on Sunday against an improved Jacksonville team.
They looked horrible. I mean, Roethlisberger looked like he didn't want to be there. I mean, literally.
They looked like the Ravens looked
like a different guy than I saw last week. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. So, what that means, I know he kind of talked tongue-in-cheek after the game, saying maybe he doesn't have it anymore. I'm not ready to declare him dead just yet either. We've seen that movie so many times. But, it was good to see that. And for as much of a living hell as the last 2 weeks were for the Ravens, they're tied for first place. They're 3-2. You hope they get some guys back, healthy. You hope Brandon Williams at some point here, if it's not this week, the week after that. John Harbaugh, when he gave his last meaningful update a little over a week ago, he had said at that point, a week or 2 from now, I'll have my fingers crossed. So you hope you get him back. You hope that the injury to Terrence West isn't that serious, although I thought quietly Buck Allen did a nice job. Alex Collins held on to the football, so those 2 did a nice job. And Matt Skura, you don't like seeing that, but whether it's him or Jermaine Illuminor or Tony Bergstrom, at this point,
we start to add them up, right? Like West and Skura and Davis, right? Am I missing anything?
Yeah. I don't know how much the Skura loss would potentially hurt, but they're clearly trying to find some stability there, and he was playing pretty well until he got hurt. But you hope Jermaine Illuminor or whoever it is potentially filling in for him can. You just have to deal with it. As much as I beat up this front office, I beat up John Harbaugh for decisions made about this offense, and one win isn't going to change my mind on that. I stand by what I wrote last week at WNST.net. At the same time, you're going to deal with some injuries, and you better have some guys that can do a respectable job for you. So, that's just the reality that they're dealing with. They dealt with an extraordinary number of injuries before the season even started, and you're going to have some attrition. So you hope you get some of these guys back. You hope that you build on the confidence that they should have been able to take away from a two-possession win the way that they were able to do that on Sunday, and you move forward onto the next opponent, and you try to stack and try to build on what they did offensively, and defensively try to clean up some of the issues that they had.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. He'll be on the backfields at Owings Mills all week long as we prepare for the Chicago Bears coming in with a whole new, different kind of confidence, I guess. We're watching a lot of baseball this week. Luke and I will be throwing that around, as well as the other things that happened in the NFL this week. We got hockey happening. Ovechkin's off to a great start as well. Obviously, the Terps taking it on the chin against, how I hate Ohio State. Things do not get easier in the Big Ten for them as well. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Just go find us out there on your mobile device. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Guaranteed. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And don't forget, our WNST tech service is there for you with breaking news anytime, anywhere, around the clock, and we never spam you. You can count on that. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home, getting you ready for what should be a nice little weekend. Have a tailgate. It's my birthday coming up this weekend, so appreciate all that, and certainly appreciate all the great folks that stepped up to try to get our Ravens live shows moved later on in the month. We'll have some details on that moving in later this week. So it's a big week around here. We have a new cat in our family. If you haven't seen that, big thanks to our friends out at Be More Humane for that over the weekend. You can find us out on our social media for all of our cat updates for our beautiful new girl, Nala. And we also have a birthday this week. I'm going to the Dundalk High Hall of Fame next week. We're off to Minnesota next weekend as well. So big doings around here. It's going to be a lot of fun. Whew. Nasty at WNST.net's the best way. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.